I guess that the media is at fault. The same way that I've seen casinos as being at fault, casino owners. You can't just say, well, someone else will do it. Come on, but you guys are advocating, right, for it. If you weren't advocating in Congress and all that shit, if you weren't buying mayors for decades at an end, with mayors that were lawyers for the mafia, then there's a reason you're doing all that, obviously, because it works. Anyway, you can't really claim that for sure somebody else would do it, because it's not even for sure that you would do it. You have to make a decision to do it. Yeah, so with regards to the media, it's true as well that, of course, the people, savor, the media stuff. But we also savor all kinds of things that in a large enough dosage is very dangerous, There has to be some sense in these things. Not just what we internally savor. I mean, like, don't try to bypass our conscious, judgmental part of the brain, our ego in the Freudian term, maybe. But don't try to bypass our critical thinking, our decision making by through what you do in advertisements. Through juxtaposing things that have no relation, like somebody's drinking beer and hanging out with chicks. That's not how most people drink their beer. But anyway. But I wasn't talking about advertising or casinos. I started out talking about the news. Yeah, right. So the media could, if they all agreed, if there wasn't a fear that the other guy will actually get ahead, if they all agreed on this and they had made a decision, such as like nuclear arms armament, decisions or any sort of peace treaty, that they would not try to bomb each other by giving the sort of saccharine sweet news that they give now, then these three could agree to go ahead and actually give the story in context. Instead of taking, everything out of context, they could give the story in context. They could assume that their viewership is smart enough to understand it, etc., etc. And they could speak, more complex things. Well, there's one side and there's another side to every issue, So the only thing is, if they did this, they would get much less money, because far fewer people would be watching, and the sort of people watching are the sort of critical thinkers that are more likely to be pissed off by those girl beer commercials than they are to be impressed by it and to actually go out and buy beer. So they wouldn't do nearly as well as advertising. So what they do instead is they give only the crazy parts in order to keep people at the edge of their seat. And it's not really even at the edge of their seat like, an archaeological discovery or a biological discovery, a genetic discovery, It's not like the edge of their seat like, hey, let me tell you something crazy about, this community in that part of the world. Absolutely wild stuff, It's not edge of the seat like that. In fact, one has to think hard about where to find something like that on the internet, where you can actually trust them, where it actually explains things, in a non-biased manner. I say this by the way, because about a week ago, Scientific American officially came out. They said, in the first time in our 175 years or so, this is the first time that we're coming out and making a decision that we call on everybody to vote for Biden, right? But people don't take it seriously. In other words, everyone who was going to already vote for Biden, they're like, oh my God, it's so overwhelming. How do conservatives not see it? But the conservatives, it's like, one second, we see what's going on all over the world, all over the country. We see how any professor that doubts in the smallest degree anything to do with woke ideology, faces risk of termination and public shame, etc., and even physical danger. We're not surprised that Scientific American was also forced in that direction. What did they add to what we already know about Trump, right? To what we knew before we even elected him in 2016, is what the conservatives would say, right? Anyway, that's why I'm saying it's hard to really find something you can trust in that subject. So what they do instead is they're focusing for the most part on danger. That's what keeps people nervous and at the edge of their seat. It's a horrible thing to do. It's an evil thing to do, because I think it causes a shit ton of anxiety. And to claim that people should, look, we don't really blame a baby, for crying in the middle of the night. At least a sane person doesn't. You don't really, you recognize that people at different ages have different levels of responsibility for things. And obviously people at different IQs and emotional intelligences and all the rest also have different abilities regarding whether to go out and gamble. Not to mention the fact that the forces arrayed against them are overwhelming. I mean, here you have, some dude who's never really knows much about gambling, right? But like everyone else, he feels that he needs more money. He goes to Vegas, and they end up hooking him kind of for life or for a long fucking time. What happens is the people who make the casinos, who chose what games to play, who chose what the felt should look like, the people who designed the carpet. I'm not making a joke, by the way. I can explain all these things to you. The kind of chairs at different kinds of tables and slots. They've had billions of dollars worth of research. They're building on billions of dollars worth of research. They're building on stuff that was already known 200 years ago. 200 years ago. The average person would have been fooled and taken by any of these things that people knew scientifically 200 years ago. It's not that there's one dude making a casino. It's not that Mr. Wynn has created the concept of casinos. It's that the Wynn Hotel isn't Mr. Wynn versus you. The Wynn Hotel is billions of dollars worth of research about your brain versus you. And the media has to change. You have to convince the public, I guess, that the media, whatever, what I've been saying, and then change it. The problem is, how do you stop it? Like, you can only stop it if all of them came out together saying the same thing, but even then you only stop it for a couple of years because, of course, somebody will come around and do it again. That's why we need things like, trust busting that Teddy Roosevelt did, where we recognize the necessity of this, and we need to do that. We need to make a law. We need to make a law against these sort of things that take advantage of the human spirit. The question is, people don't like to go too far. For example, like people were upset with Bloomberg that he wanted to get rid of cans that were too big. But people don't really see, cans of, soda, fountain soda, whatever. So obviously one has to be very careful about this lawmaking thing. But what I'm saying specifically with regard to the media, I think makes a lot of sense. That people, if there's any media that's judged to be by of course, beyond a reasonable doubt, beyond a truly reasonable doubt. I mean, like, we have to have serious judges and whatever else. But if any media company is shown to be instilling fear in people, beyond what the judges think, it makes sense, and the judges should come, by the way, from that community, from those communities of people that are actually, afraid of things or whatever. In other words, the judges, we need to make sure that they're not stifling free speech in any way. So, and this wouldn't be stifling free speech. In other words, that media company would be fined or whatever, and like in the olden days, if someone said a dirty word, they were fined. So they need to be fined, or they should really only be allowed to broadcast certain times, right? And to claim that the media is a person and it deals with, the right to free speech. Free speech used to mean basically, as far as your voice could carry you. And now, where everybody was more or less equal. Not everybody, but it was close enough, Now free speech means that a conglomerate of billionaires can shout at you from billboards and even skywriters all the time, and you can't shout back.